Hi everyone, Daljit here from Astrolab 21. In this video we're going to explore a pretty interesting and fascinating transit that we're going through right now. We're experiencing something known as a mystic rectangle. And this is a pattern that occurs in the sky between four planets that are interacting in a very specific way. And because this one involves Pluto in Aquarius, conjoined with Venus, opposing Mars, which is gestation retrograde in Leo, and at a very specific point with the nodal axis, with the north node in Aries, which Mars rules, and the south node in Libra, which Venus rules. There's something really particularly potent with this transit, and I think it's stirring up a lot of things in the collective. And I was doing a post this morning as I was looking at the chart and sort of doing a deep analysis of it, and I thought it'd be worth doing a video on it to explore it a little deeper, because I think it really is triggering some really deep emotional and karmic work for all of us. We're seeing it in the collective, and we're probably all feeling it individually and probably in our relationship dynamics. We've got something very strong going on here between Venus and Mars. And so I thought it's just a great example of how we can use the art and science of astrology to really understand the dynamics at play. What is this energy that we're all experiencing together? So I'm going to explore it pretty deeply. So I want to jump right in and take a look at some graphics, and we're going to look at the chart so we can see what's being constellated. But of course, lots of talk about Pluto moving into Aquarius, right? We are officially through the portal here. We are into the Aquarian era. Now, I'm not saying this is the age of Aquarius. To my estimation, we're still a good 100 years away from that. It's a whole different cycle, but we are definitely in the era of Aquarius. This is a 20-year cycle that we're just beginning with Pluto moving through Aquarius, and it's going to be a pretty unprecedented time on this planet. I'm pretty sure of that. And so we've just moved into it. A lot is happening in the world, and a lot of people are pointing to Pluto in Aquarius as being this sort of the trigger of all of this. If you think about what's happening in Syria with the rebels taking over and the Assad regime being toppled, what's happening with this very strange case of the assassination of the United Health CEO, what's going on with the Diddy case, and now Jay-Z being pulled into this very dark web. It all is being constellated and reflected in the transits that we're seeing, particularly Pluto and Venus, and Pluto opposing retrograde Mars, right? There's something very dark and violent about these configurations, and it has a dark sexual component to it. So we're going to take a look at the charts and do a deep analysis of it so we can understand and help ourselves to navigate through this period. So let's jump in and take a look. Before I jump to the graphics and the screen, though, I just want to remind everyone I am launching a new series of courses. So if you go to my website, astrolab21.com, click on the courses banner, you'll see that we have the Jupiter Saturn Cycles course. Saturn builds what Jupiter dreams. And I'm really excited about this. It's going to be a 4-week live course starting in January, the 4 Saturdays in January, where we are going to explore what I think is the most important cycle to track by transit in your chart. The interactions between Saturn and Jupiter will tell us everything we need to know about how do we build our dreams. Saturn builds what Jupiter dreams. So super excited. It's going to be limited to 20 people. We'll do weekly live lectures. There'll be a consultation that you'll get between the 3rd and the 4th week. I will meet privately with everyone in the course to help you set your chart so that you can take advantage of this really important transit coming up. Because we're going to have Jupiter moving into Cancer. We're going to have Saturn moving into Aries, 2025 and into 2026. This is the beginning of a brand new cycle for Saturn. So wherever that is going to take place in your chart is going to be really important to set the tone so that you can really build a solid foundation and help navigate the transits that are coming up for us all. So if you're interested, I'd love to have you join me. Go to the website and check that out. Okay. So let's talk about Venus and Pluto here, and Aquarius and the underworld. Okay, and so that's really the trigger event of this whole thing has been Venus's conjunction with Pluto at 0 degrees Aquarius. And this happened a couple days ago, and we're just moving out of it now. And the effect of this has been really, really potent, which is why I wanted to do a deeper dive of it and show you really how this is playing out for us and for the collective. And when we're talking about Venus and Pluto, one of the ways we can look at this transit and the interaction between these two forces, these two planetary archetypes, is to look at the myth of Persephone and Hades. I've done this rendition here using AI of what has been classically known as the rape of Persephone. And this has been depicted in art throughout the ages of the myth of Persephone, the maiden, who was abducted by Hades, and he takes her into the underworld, and essentially it's the rape of the maiden, right? And so this is a really deeply, deeply powerful myth that has resonated throughout the ages. And so, this has been depicted in sculptures. It's been depicted in many paintings. This has been a theme that has been explored in the arts throughout the ages. And it's very potent. It's very erotic. It's very charged. It's very sexual. It's very violent. There's something really powerful about this myth. And with myths, there's always many, many, many layers to explore. There are psychological dimensions, there are cultural dimensions, there are mythic dimensions, there are cosmic dimensions to all of the symbolisms and imagery that we get from mythology. But what's at the heart here of the myth of Persephone and Hades is really Venus and Pluto when we take it to the archetypal level of astrology. And we can just see the kind of energy that gets constellated when we get the interaction of these two planets, where you have Venus, the planet of sensuality and sexuality and of the feminine, of beauty and romance and sexual desire, the aesthetics and the glamour and the attraction. There's something very beautiful and erotic about this symbol. So Persephone as the maiden is a personification of the archetype of Venus. On the other side, you look at Pluto, which is this dark, underground, subterranean power. It is aggressive, it is fertilizing, it is instinctual, it is unconscious, right? It can be violent, libidinal, mysterious. So you can see there's a darker sexual tone to the Pluto archetype. And so when you marry Venus and Pluto, it has this mythical dimension to it of the rape of Persephone, of the feminine maiden being dragged down into the underworld, where she can be fertilized by Pluto's deep evolutionary force. Now I'm going to read a few quotes from a book that I love called The Astrology of Fate by Liz Greene. It's one of my favorite books in my library, and she talks quite a bit about Pluto and Venus and a real interesting, deep appreciation of the archetype of Pluto, which I think is important to understand in the context of this transit and I think worth exploring in general. I'm going to read from my copy of it, and the first selection is from the second chapter, is called Fate and Pluto. And I'm going to read you a couple of quotes from this book here. She says, "The male figure of Hades as underworld lord is a relatively late formulation. The primordial chaos from which life emerges and to which it returns belongs in the beginning to the Great Mother, or the goddess Nyx." And where she goes on to say here that the earliest images of the goddess are those of a phallic mother, a self-fertilizing deity who bears the Morai without male seed. In the end, this goddess vanishes into her own depths, and the phallic power is represented as a male deity, Hades. Although he is a god, he is the dark sun, servant and executor of the unseen mother. Right? So this is a really interesting way of thinking about Hades or Pluto in a very different way, that beneath this male portrayal, this male deity or god, is the great mother, right? The self-fertilizing phallic mother who creates the fates, the Morai, without male seed. She creates them of herself, right? So what this is pointing to is that beneath this male deity of Pluto or Hades is the mother Nyx herself, the great goddess, right? So that's a very interesting layer that has been lost through history, right? When the Greek patriarchy really emerged is when a lot of these primordial feminine deities were suppressed or went back underground, right? And so they are beneath them, right? So Hades is really her son, right? And lover, as we often explore these themes of incest and very taboo subjects that the mythology is forcing us to really recognize on a psychological level, right? So we have to take these myths in a deep, deep, deep contemplation of what the symbolism here. This is a very rich symbolism. So I'm going to read a few more quotes here. So later in the chapter, she talks about the myth of Dionysus, but what she's relating to here is this, the ambiguity of the child who embraces the myth of the underworld. And it's about what she calls the fertility of any encounter with Pluto in its full fruit. Where she says, an enriched sense of the vitality and sensuality of the body is certainly one frequent facet of Pluto's fruit. There may also be other children who spring from the experience of ravishment, a new outlook which is deeper and broader, a new discovery of inner resources, a more profound sense of one's own purpose and autonomy. All these things must be paid for through the rupturing of the psychic hymen which protects us through our innocence. That's such an intense metaphor, right? The rupturing of the psychic hymen, right? This is what is really deeply implied by the myth of the rape of Persephone by Hades, that we all have to go through this deep, deep psychological transformation in which our innocence is lost in order to be reborn with a more mature outlook, right? She calls it the rape of the soul somewhere else in this book. And so this is a really intense concept, and this is something that with this transit, and this is something that happens, Venus conjuncts Pluto about once a year in its cycle. But this is the first contact that Pluto is making with another planet since its ingress into Aquarius and sort of initiating this new era that we're in. So what is this? What is in store for Pluto and Aquarius? And there's been a lot of speculation, a lot of hand-wringing, along with a lot of, enthusiasm and excitement, right? Because for many people, I think Pluto and Aquarius represents this new threshold, this new world that's opening up. And it is actually the new age, right? The Aquarian age. And many of the symbols of Aquarius, which are, in modern times we associate with the planet of Uranus, right? The liberator, the Promethean god who steals fire from the gods and delivers them to humanity, right? It's all about this humanitarian impulse, very progressive, right? Grassroots, bottom up, right? The holarchy, versus a more traditional view of Aquarius, which was traditionally ruled by Saturn, which has a much different tone, right? Which is that cold, authoritarian nature, right? Because Aquarius can be very cold, it can be very calculating, it's very scientific, it's very technological, right? So one of the other possible constellations of Pluto and Aquarius is this like techno dystopia, right? Is it a techno dystopia or is it a techno utopia? And I feel like we're really navigating through that question about what is Pluto and Aquarius going to be. And it's very interesting as it ingressed into Aquarius earlier this year and last year. Each time it did, the issues of AI were really at the forefront, almost right in lockstep. And so now it feels like with Pluto moving full force now through Aquarius, that artificial intelligence and things to do with technology are going to be moving at an accelerated rate. It seems like it's kind of unavoidable at this point. And the question is, how are we dealing with it? What is the meaning of this? And I think it's creating a tremendous amount of anxiety in many people, and a great amount of enthusiasm for others who see this as the salvation of humanity. It's going to solve all of our problems, that technology will fix all the problems that our previous technologies have created, which is a bit of a slippery slope. And so for many, that the specter of that is not so promising. So if you're in between on that, you're not alone. But this is kind of an interesting take on the myth, this deep, deep myth of Pluto stealing our innocence. And as Pluto moves into Aquarius here, what are we losing? What is the innocence that is being lost? What is the rupturing of our psychic hymen, if you will, that is initiating us into some very profound evolutionary experience? We are being called into a transformative process. And this symbolism with Venus and Pluto moving into Aquarius here is, I think, ripe or potent with this imagery. So I'm going to share a few more quotes here and then we'll move on and look at the chart, but I think it's worth exploring. And it's interesting, she talks about Venus Pluto as being a sort of collision with the dark realm, and it is an exposure to the side of love which is most frequently seen in the marriage counselor's consulting room. The power battles, manipulations, greeds, vendettas, and oppressions which are often only detectable by their smell. In this dark landscape we meet the Gorgon raging, and the unfeeling Iceman withdrawing, the terrible mother and the castrated son, the spider or scorpion which eats its mate after the act of love. Again, it's pretty intense imagery, right? If you think about these power battles, these sexual power battles. And so if you're feeling this intensity within yourself, within your relationships, this may be one of the things that's being triggered by this transit. We're being forced to deal with sort of the void, the dark underworld of Pluto in its most fierce form, which is actually the great devouring mother who sits behind this archetype. Okay, so one more quote I'm going to pull and then we'll jump to the charts here. Okay, so further on in this chapter, she says, Pluto is not only a rapist, breaking violently into our outer life, but is also a robber, stealing Persephone and dragging her below with him. The rapist robber is a common dream image accompanying the onset of depression and loss of interest in life. So here she's associating the myth of Persephone with the onset of depression. Right? We think about this as the psychological impact of this mythological symbolism. And so when we have this transit in effect, there can often be a sense of depression, a sense of apathy, a sense of hopelessness. So if you've been feeling that in yourself, this may give you some insight into why we may be having those sides of feelings and how we can work through them. So that's a really interesting insight into this myth. And again, that deep appreciation of Pluto as, the great dark feminine, the mother goddess, is a really potent symbol to consider when you're thinking about Pluto. I know for myself and some other people have talked about Pluto as being the great grandmother, right? There is a feminine quality that's hidden behind the face of the masculine god. So something worth considering as we think about this transit and what's being constellated here in this mystic rectangle. So let's get back to the charts here and talk about Pluto and Aquarius. Obviously, this is going to be the theme for 20 years, and this very beginning of this period, often when planets first move into a sign, there's this sort of sudden rush of the archetype gets expressed, right? And here I feel like we're on the threshold of Pluto taking us into, the many, many facets of the Aquarian archetype. And as I said, you can have the more Uranian qualities of this freedom and rebelliousness, this revolutionary quality that can be very sudden, it can be very erratic, it has a progressive quality to it, but it's also a very paradoxical sign, right? Because it also can be very inflexible, it can be perverse and aloof. There's this coldness and detachedness that is also associated with this sign. So it's at once sort of collective, right? We see the words like fellowship, but it's also incredibly individualistic, which seems like a paradox. And so we may be grappling with the paradoxical qualities of Aquarius, particularly with Pluto really triggering the onset of this phase and this cycle. Now, as Venus comes through, and this is really the first planet to make contact with Pluto since it ingressed into Aquarius a couple weeks ago. So it's really richly symbolic that it's Venus, the first one to come into contact and bring her love and sensuality and values and feminine nature into the mix. So we have Venus in Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius. And what they're making is what's called a mystic rectangle. All right, so this is where you get 4 planets who work together in a strongly balanced and integrated pattern. And those are the key words here we want to focus on: balance and integration. Because that's what this is going to offer us. It gives us and the collective a chance at inner harmony. And there's a challenging opposition that's at the heart of this configuration that needs to be faced and dealt with consciously. So let's take a look at the chart and we'll get to see what is this mystic rectangle we're talking about here. Here we have Pluto and Venus, right? And we can see that Venus is now moving away from Pluto. It's been about 5 degrees since it was the exact conjunct a few days ago. And now it's moving out. It's as if Venus is now emerging from the underworld. When it met at the conjunction, it was dragged down into the underworld. And now she's re-emerging on the other side of this transit. And one of the ways, the metaphors we could think about is she's literally been impregnated by Pluto in Aquarius. She's carrying the seed, if you will, of that Plutonian archetype in the sign of Aquarius. What is Pluto trying to birth in this new period? Right now we have Venus carrying it forth, and she will carry this sort of love child, if you will, all the way until the opposition, which is going to happen later into 2025. So we'll get to witness this unfolding, and this is one of the great, beautiful, magical, mystical delights of being able to understand astrology at this level. We can see these things. What are the patterns emerging, right? And we can say, okay, what's going to happen with Venus as she moves forward? We're going to get a Venus retrograde next year in Aries, Mars's sign, right? So we'll be able to read into this. Will she be bringing this contact into that retrograde? What is going to happen in your life? Where will that retrograde occur in your chart? Right? I know it's going to take place right on my natal moon, so I'm very interested in this transit. And so it's something you can learn to study, to track, and to use these energies in a much more proactive way rather than the fates always happening to you. You get to work with them. It's something I always encourage clients to learn to work with these energies rather than having them work on us, if you will. So there we have one piece of this mystic rectangle. And if we look at what's happening here, it's making this trine aspect to the south node in Libra, which is Venus's sign, and it's making this sextile aspect to the north node in Aries, which is Mars's sign. Now Mars is over here in Leo, retrograde, and it just stationed retrograde a few days ago. So Mars is virtually standing still in the sky right now. It's very slow moving, it's very reflective, right? And we can see that it is in exact opposition with Venus and a wider opposition with Pluto. And sometime later today or early tomorrow morning, this will be an exact opposition. Mars will move back to the 5th degree, and it's going to meet Venus just as she's emerging from this encounter with Pluto in the Aquarian Underworld. Right? And this is what I was writing about this morning in a post on social media. I thought how interesting to have this intense experience of Venus descending to the underworld, getting impregnated by Pluto and carrying that seed, and now reemerges above ground from this experience. And the first thing she encounters is an opposition from Mars, right? Who's retrograde and stationed and is moving backwards, right? And I thought about, how beautiful, because if you think about this, Venus is actually empowered by this experience, right? As much as dark and as challenging as an encounter with Pluto can be, right? What Liz Greene is implying is that now, well, she has this sort of fecundity. The feminine, the maiden has been empowered now and is now carrying this potent seed with her and within her, right? We saw on the graphic how Pluto is associated with the Kundalini rising, right? So this is Venus who's now coming into a really powerful position, right? The Kundalini, the Shakti has been released, and there's a sense that she's bringing above the sacred feminine. And here she encounters Mars retrograde in Leo, and I got this sense of a mutual receptivity, that Mars is a lot more, a little softer and a more open to this influence than he normally would be if he was moving forward, right? This retrogradation is an opening and an invitation for Mars to reclaim the divine masculine, right? Maybe healing some of this toxic masculinity and reclaiming the divine masculine at the same time that Venus is calling us to reclaim the divine feminine. And that's what I see in this configuration. And that's more enhanced by the fact, if we look at, the fact that Mars is in trine with the North Node in Aries, his own sign, and Venus is in trine with her own sign of Libra, where the South Node is. So this is the configuration of the mystic rectangle. You have two planets in opposition, and they're each in a very harmonious relationship with these other 2 points. And in this case, it happens to be the nodes. And the fact that the nodes are in the signs of Venus and Mars respectively is pointing us to the opportunity to heal, the opportunity for harmony and integration if these two forces can be consciously integrated, right? That's the key. Conscious integration. Can we be conscious of it? And remember, that was something that would, that quote I shared from Liz Greene, right? About this being the symbol, the Pluto and Venus of the marriage counselor, some of the more difficult things that can come up between couples, the battle of the sexes. But what I'm seeing here is an opportunity for a reintegration of this dynamic, something that Carl Jung called the hieros gamos, right? The sacred marriage. And it's a call to integrate that part within ourselves as well as within our relationships, right? What Jung would call the anima and the animus, right? The feminine anima within every male, the masculine animus within every female, right? We have to integrate these polarities within ourselves so that we can come as complete beings into our relationships and into the world at large. And so it feels like this is one of those really great opportunities for that kind of integration. We hear a lot in the collective about the sacred feminine. We've heard a lot in the last few years about what we've known as toxic masculinity, the idea of the patriarchy. And I think there's a lot of hope that this Pluto and Aquarius phase will be a recalibration of that. There's been a recognition that the patriarchy has had a long course and it's probably overdue for a course correction, and that there's a resurgence of the feminine and an integration and an acknowledgement of the need to have a better balance. And so this is the kind of thing that gives us the opportunity to tune into that kind of balancing. Can we bring a reharmonization of these two powerful forces? And there's another factor in the chart that I think is worth noting, and that's that this north node is sort of broadly conjunct by about 6 degrees here, Neptune in Pisces. And so this adds a degree of a beautiful sort of compassion, a deep, deep, deep universal love that it comes into the mix of this mystical rectangle, particularly that it's on the north node in Aries. And of course, the nodal axis is going to shift into Pisces and Virgo next year as well. Another one of the massive transits that we have coming our way, right? So it's like, this is sort of the last few degrees of this 18-month transit of the nodes through Aries and Libra. And again, this has been the theme of this entire nodal shift. A reorientation and a healing, right? With the South Node moving through Libra, I think we've been healing relationships. We've been healing our relationship to the feminine. And we're moving into a new kind of masculinity. Aries, the true masculine, a reclaiming of that sacred masculine that is in balance with the feminine, that recognizes that integration and that harmonization, right? So this could be the best outcome of a transit like this. This energy is now very potent, right? It's potentiated by this transit, we would say. It's activated. So if you have any planetary position in your natal chart in these early degrees of Aquarius or Leo, or of Aries and Libra, you kind of have a portal, an activation to this energy. You can bring this into your life. You can bring this into your relationships. You can bring this into the collective by harnessing this frequency, this cosmic resonance that we have, and aligning with this evolutionary potential, right? This is the beauty of these kinds of transits, the potency, the richness, the eroticism, the opportunity to partake in these myths, right? And that's what these archetypes are. They are invitations to co-create, right? These things aren't happening to us, they're happening through us. Everything we see is showing up through our process, individual, one-on-one, and collectively, right? This is the beauty of understanding what we would call the archetypal lens, the archetypal view. It's so potent, it's so powerful, it stirs my imagination and my heart and my soul. It just captures every part of me, which is why I'm such an enthusiast for this art and this science. So I hope you'll be able to sort of find this for yourself. Where are these, if you have it in your chart, or just in general, just to sense into the collective, you know, what we're experiencing here with this transit, because it is really, really powerful, right? So, you know, can we use this mystic rectangle? Can we use this to good effect? That, you know, this is a chance to evolve the collective and to balance and integrate the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. And so the myth is being rewritten before our very eyes. And this myth is being retold, rewritten here in the 21st century, right? We are being invited to participate in the myth, in the rewriting of it. Each and every one of us has a part to play. That's the invitation, right? That's what we used to call, you know, the participation mystique. That's what anthropologists would refer to for our ancient forebears who believed in an animated universe, right? An animated cosmos that we are reanimating. And I think that's part of what's happening in this period. We've lost touch with this, and that's why astrology has kept this alive through the centuries. And I think it's a reason why it's having such a moment right now that's having a rebirth. There's a revival because it's helping us to connect with something much, much more deep and much, much more profound that has left, you know, our modern world has left us without this kind of sacred compass, if you will, you know, helping us to navigate a soul compass. And so I hope that's insightful for you. I hope that you can have a takeaway from that that allows you to go deeper, explore the myths, explore the archetypes, explore the astrology. They're all connected, right? There's an invitation to participate and to use these energies. This is like a cosmic portal. When these things happen, we're all moving through this together. And it's very, very profound. So, yeah, I hope that you can navigate through this. We've got a lot of intense and exciting astrology coming our way. 2025 is going to be one hell of a year. So I'll be doing some more videos shortly, and be doing my annual preview of the year to come, hopefully in the next week or so. So look out for that. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you will like and please subscribe to the channel. I would love to get you as a subscriber. The more people I can get to share the word here, the more impact I can have with this channel, which I really hope to do. So I appreciate you. So go out and spread the love. You know, try to manifest this incredible sacred energy that is available to us all at this time. All right. Till next time. Sat Nam, everyone.